In early February of this year, a man was gunned down, prosecutors say, by his ex-father-in-law.
He pulled up over there, I walked up and shot him.
The defendant, James Brashear, assassinated John Mast.
The man from North Dakota was identified as John Mast. Mast later died at St. Joseph Regional Medical Center. The alleged shooter, James Brashear, told police he purposely went to Rosar's to kill Mast.
I knew I would go to jail. I know I had to pay for this.
Brashear is now facing a first-degree murder charge.
Premeditated, I thought about it.
Did he just say premeditated?
I've never ever had a defendant in a murder case use the word, this was premeditated.
Parental alienation is a process in which a child becomes estranged from their parent due to the psychological manipulation of the other parent.
You know, the crazy part about John's story is he went through one of the worst things that a father can go through. He was accused of sexually abusing his children.
Court documents Mast's ex-wife's family accused him of child molestation. KLEW searched previous states that Mast lived and did not find any criminal history relating to the allegations.
There was a letter from the Williston Police Department, North Dakota. There was no significant evidence to establish that your son had done anything wrong or committed any crimes. John was beyond cooperative with the criminal investigation, even went as far as consenting to a polygraph, which he passed. My criminal cases with John were closed years ago and no charges were filed.
As good of a person as John was, I think he was an even better dad. We are looking at the second chapter of the John Mast story. I'm praying that this week we see results, we see justice.
Mr. Brashear, will you please stand and face the jury?
Kind of reserve myself because you never know what's going to happen in these cases.
And Madam Clerk, will you please read the verdict?
We, the jury, for a verdict, unanimously answered the questions submitted to us as follows.
And I was like, you gotta be kidding me.
All right, guys, we are in Lewiston, Idaho, town I have dreaded coming to. We are looking at the second chapter of the John Mast story. The reason that we're doing this, John came to get his story out, and we're going to continue to get his story out. When he was on my show, John, what are you doing for the kids when you're not around them? Are you writing them journals? Yes, I'm writing them journals. We got his last words on there. It was because of that interview we knew there was journals. You want to know what's going on in your dad's head? Look, he was thinking about you every second of every day. I was there standing over that casket, looking down at his hands that were just worn. You could see how hard the guy was working.
John Mast case, I heard it when it first happened. You know, we don't get that many murders here in this town. Not too many people get gunned down. So when we heard what happened, all you hear at first is how this horrible abuser finally got killed by this upset grandfather trying to spare his grandkids of all these horrible things. And it took several months after that before you actually began to hear what actually happened. It would be trickled out a bit. It's like the media had an agenda and they were driving it.
To the people of this area, I want them to know they need to be aware of what goes on in these court cases. You see it in the news and you read what the news says, so that's what you believe, but we really need to dig deeper.
He was a good man, and I knew when this happened, he was going to be painted out to be somebody that he wasn't. And I'm not going to let that happen. So I don't care who it pisses off that we're in this town. I stand with John. It's been 3 years since I interviewed John Mast. John was just another person that would watch my show. And then on November of 2020, he joined me on the show. He was the very first one to sign up, was a supporter. I could tell John was different. Instead of saying, I need this, this is my story, he was always providing words of encouragement. And anybody you talk to that knew John will tell you how he went out of his way to help people. That's not just a testament to John. His whole family's that way. This was a guy that was driving 30-hour round trips just to be able to see his kids for an hour with supervised visitation.
With John, gosh, he was so soft-spoken and so tolerant of the kids. They would have huge swings during the visits. There was at times that they would say such mean things to him. He would just be super loving through it all. Because I know you don't really mean that.
And like I said, I didn't know John, but really what affected me is when I was able to see him on the podcast and to see his demeanor and to see how calm he was and to see how much he loved his children. I'm a pretty good judge of character, and I could tell right then and there that this man did nothing that they were accused him of.
He did everything the system told him to, and I am hoping this week that the system protects him. It actually gives faith back to this community, but I have very little hopes. I'm trying to stay positive. For somebody that's been falsely accused and they can prove it, I would tell you that I believe the person that made that accusation, if they maliciously made that accusation, should get the fullest extent of punishment that we legally can give them. I don't think that the punishments are big enough. You just ruined everything about somebody's life. You could have ruined their relationship with their kids. You could have ruined their job, their career.
It completely ruins your reputation. Even if you prove that it's 100% false, it's always still there. It's like a dark cloud that just follows you.
In this area, it's starting to become very common for guys to experience false sexual allegations when it comes to kids and even just exes.
In this particular case, that was the accusation that was made. We see attorneys actually telling their clients that this is a tactic that you can use. And it's been documented, it's on video. It's what they call the silver bullet. If I think I'm gonna lose a case, or if I need to get the upper hand, I just accuse you of sexual molestation or physical abuse, and at that point, you're usually fighting a big uphill battle.
I've been through pretty much the exact same allegations as John, the exact same threats, the exact same family court. So for me, it really hit home because I am John, basically, just a different name.
I believe that's what happened in this case, without a shadow of a doubt.
So the way I learned about John's death was actually through a text message from one of my former employees, and they said John Mast was just shot at Rosars. I was in complete disbelief. I did not want to believe it.
My first thoughts on the case was shock that someone would go to this extreme to keep a father out of his children's lives.
It was made clear right away that there was basically a complete confession.
So what happened here while at Rosars?
He pulled up over there, I walked up and shot him.
And John went for years fighting for his kids, fighting for his reputation. In the end, all it did was cost him his life.
I've lived in Lewiston my whole life. I was born here, raised here, went to school here, college here. My folks are buried here. Growing up here, life was great. It was absolutely fantastic. It was every little kid's dream.
Lewiston is a population of roughly 32 to 35,000 people. We border the state of Washington. It's just right across the river, and there's another city over there that's about 15 to 17,000 people.
The signs of the time when the corruption it affects even the small towns. It's getting bad no matter where you live, and Lewiston is no different.
This case is scheduled for 2 weeks. Prosecution doesn't think it's going to take any more than a week. We came for a week, and I'm sure the plan that we've got is going to change many times while we're here. One thing that will not change is we are here to stand with John, regardless. That's what we're here for. I just have to believe if there was any case that was going to go through, it would be this one, because it's hands down. You got a confession from Jim. He was going to plead guilty to second-degree murder. Family said, no, that's not right.
Day one of trial, I was internally excited, almost like a little kid, because we were getting cameras in the court.
There was courtroom cameras streaming live. You don't get to see that, and especially in a small town like this. That's huge, so people can actually see what is going on in real time.
And the way that the prosecution presented their case and the way that the judge controlled his courtroom It was a breath of fresh air to actually see the system working how it was designed to work, because we've seen so many times how the system has not worked how it was designed.
It was an interesting day, guys. Started off, we heard from several different witnesses. The case went a lot quicker than it was supposed to go, but so far so good. I mean, the arguments that I've heard from the defense didn't really have much. Remember when he was asking Steven, Steven said that it was either a black or blue Suburban. He said, are you sure it wasn't brown? It's like, really? In my opinion. I think that's to discredit the witness. See, he named it as a different color, so you don't need to listen to this. And the fact that we could even have a human being that could do that to a brother that sat there and watched his own brother get murdered, shot down, that's your justice system.
Your testimony is that you saw it and you recognized it as being the car that belonged to Miss Brashear, yes?
Yes.
You said it was blue?
Yes.
Did it actually brown?
You have to be a very cold, heartless person to take another's life. So far with this case, though, it looks like everything's going good. I think the prosecution is doing an amazing job.
On February 5th, 2021, the defendant, James Brashear, assassinated John Mast in the Rosars parking lot. The evidence will show you that the defendant decided to kill, got prepared, and laid in wait in the Rosars parking lot and killed John Mast when the time was right.
I believe that I received the initial 911 call, and I believed it was from the sister. The center kind of went chaotic.
I stood over John's casket. That was hard. I have been consumed in this story for 2.5 years now. That 911 call was one of the most painful things. The most painful thing I've had to listen to since I was doing Dad Talk.
The 911 location of your emergency. There's someone shooting at my brother in the Rosars parking lot. Rosars? Yes. Okay, and there's shots fired? Yes. Okay. And are you there? I said, yes, we need to. Hold on just a second. Hold on. Yeah. I told 911. John, sit down, lay down. Lay down, John.
You can hear John's sister trying to comfort him. I mean, and you can basically hear John dying. You can hear him dying. I mean, it was just, and to know all the things that he's been accused of and got exonerated for, and to hear that man dying.
John, the ambulance is coming. John, stay with us. We're really bleeding. So we got to stop the bleeding. That's it, buddy. John, I love you. I can't see you. Get me out tonight. I'm right here. There's just no, John. Say something.
I just don't see how if a juror hears that. What if that was your kid? What if that was your family? What if that was your brother? What if that was your dad? I don't know if that was as painful for you guys as it was everybody else, but the whole family was taking that pretty hard, as was I. That was hard to listen to.
When I heard that John got killed, I was heartbroken and devastated. We were supposed to be meeting up, talk about what has been going on in the valley here. We started talking about like how we could reach other dads that were going through the same stuff that we were. We were just seeing it just in the workplace, and just in our everyday lives, like knowing that we can't be the only two that are going through this, especially with what we were seeing and hearing.
Yeah, I'd listen to that 911 call, I don't know how many times before trial. It was a very powerful piece of evidence, more powerful than I expected it to be in the courtroom. So it really stood out, I thought, to me, sitting there, and I think part of it, you hear the family kind of sobbing in the back. That was a very powerful moment in court.
We will just have to wait and see what happens tomorrow. We got out of there at 2:30 today. The team is energized. I have faith that we're gonna have a very good verdict. The way it's looking right now, I think it's gonna be good. All right, so day 2 of the trial, guys. We are getting ready this morning. So far, I think everything is going good. Ready to get to the courthouse, ready to do some dad talk. Interesting day. We saw Jim Brashear get on the stand. That's something you don't usually see in these type of cases. You don't see the defendant get on, which is making me think, in my opinion, they don't really have much. But it was probably expected for him to. There was an outburst that went down in the courtroom.
You say come out and said, well, something wrong. Can I defend myself?
Where he's like, can I defend myself? And exactly what we thought it was gonna be.
They were crying and screaming and pleading not to go.
Trying to plant that seed in there that there's more to this story, but we're not allowed to say it. At one point, the judge called counsel and let him know, I'm pretty sure, let him know, like, hey, you're doing what you're not supposed to do.
Yeah, maybe we can take a break. Let's take a break. I need to see counsel in the chambers.
John's case, because it had sexual allegations, we knew that it was going to create in my opinion, it would create a bias if people heard it. Who doesn't want to take up for the kids? Obviously, we all do. I would have been that same guy. Very rare that people are going to actually look into a case and see, I want to see what was said. I want to see where he proved himself innocent. Let me see the documents. So it is a very deadly thing, known as a silver bullet. People are going to look at you as guilty, no matter how much evidence there is to show that you were innocent.
So here we are. John's dead, and they're dragging him through the mud. And this is not about John. This is about James Brashear committing first-degree murder.
That was the reason this case got pushed back so many times. They wanted to be able to use it against John because I believe that's the only defense that there is. And every time it's been denied. So he's not supposed to bring that up in the case, and they were really walking a tightrope on that thing, and the judge put a stop to it. I was glad that he did.
Instructed to disregard those statements and not consider those in your deliberations. Are there any objection to that?
They call the jury back in there and they say, hey, you're to dismiss anything that was said. My fear is, how do you unhear something? And the fact that we're not going in there, I'm hoping that that doesn't taint this thing.
Do you think of yourself as a fixer?
My nickname is the Fix-It Man. You gotta follow my Fix-It.
Yeah, when he made the statement that he was a fixer, it did stand out to me also. I think it stood out to a lot of people because it seemed to line up with what happened here. He was fixing something for his daughter.
That was pretty damning. The whole family comes to him when there's a problem. And obviously, they weren't shy about promoting that John was the problem. And they were going to do whatever it took to fix the problem.
The evidence that I thought was the most powerful because it was, we're hearing from the defendant himself admit to committing the crime and admit to every single element of the crime, the premeditation, and you're hearing it both from him himself sitting in the back of the cop car and then also through the interview that Officer Crane did with him.
It's premeditated, I thought about it, weighed out the cost,
I planned it, I premeditated it, and I know I'm gonna have to do jail time.
And for me, I felt like this was over. Like, we've got this at this point. I mean, you never can know what a jury's gonna do, of course. But I was like, it's gone about as good as we could ever hope it could go.
We also heard from Becky.
We were not with him when he walked over to John, standing by. And you were not with him when he shot the father of your children, were you? No. I don't have any.
We heard from Robin. Wow.
And so you never told police about your conversations with the defendant that day?
I don't recall. I honestly don't recall anything about that.
You don't recall whether you spoke to police or not?
I did not speak to police to my recollection.
Just caught in a lie. Caught in a lie. Right on the stand. And nobody does anything about it?
I was a little frustrated with the backing off from the prosecutors on crossing testimony with Robin and Rebecca. You have the false accusers right there on the stand, so that didn't sit right with me.
Yeah, we kind of wanted them to walk into stuff that we knew we could go back and discredit, because we didn't really know what they were going to say. That was part of the problem, you know, with witnesses like that. We knew that they were going to be difficult and that they were going to want to try and push it and say whatever they want to say to try and, you know, get the defendant off of this.
And so if you did not speak to police, you would not have told them about your conversations with Mr. Brashear that day?
No.
And you would not have told them about Mr. Brashear crying? You never told police that?
Not to my recollection.
I just wanted to stick with the stuff that I knew he had admitted to that was on video. I felt like it was a lot better approach that way, because then we were able to bring Crane back on, show that there's these text messages, there was other plans. They're clearly not being truthful about what they knew and what they didn't know.
All right, guys, it's day 3 and we are heading back in there.
Day 3, Crane's testimony was spot on. It kind of alleviated the frustration from day 2.
Along the lines of the text messages that were going back and forth throughout the day, there was one text message that early on when we saw it really stood out. It was really hard to kind of figure out what was going on with it, and it was just the one that he sent to his wife saying it's done.
After the shooting occurred, what is the first way the defendant's phone communicated with Robin's phone?
Mr. Brashear texted Robin, and the text said, "It's done."
The text message, "It's done." Wow. If that's not a smoking gun, what is a smoking gun?
It was a really interesting text to have been sent right after John was killed. And I felt like that evidence just contributed to the fact that this was something that he planned. He went there on purpose to kill John, and he did it, and it's done. That's what that meant.
So because I've been involved in this case since day 1, I'm able to see those documents that wasn't able to be presented in court. And it's just heartbreaking. I mean, the whole defense's case was the fact that they didn't know anything about this unsupervised visit that was coming. Court documents clearly state that they knew 2 months prior.
So when Rebecca testified, when she made sort of those hard statements about not knowing that it was a surprise, and we knew, but we had evidence that we could bring in to show that that was not the case. The defense's theory, when they were sticking with it, was that this was an emotional breakdown, I guess, and I think her testimony went along those lines just like all the other witnesses did.
That morning when you woke up, did you have any expectation when you shortly happens?
Not at all.
And we just felt like it would be more impactful to have the officer bring in these text messages to show that clearly not the full truth of what was happening then.
During your review of the text messages located on the defendant's phone, did you also locate a text message about the custody order?
I did.
Crane nailed it. The text messages nailed it.
And who is this text message conversation between?
It's between Jim and Becky.
And can you describe what the text message is?
Yes, so the previous night, so February 4th of 2021 at 8:49 p.m., Jim texted Becky and said, "Did you say the original document said John would pick them up at 6 tomorrow?" And then just about 5 minutes later, Becky responded yes.
And so based upon this text message, it appears that the defendant knew the exchange was going to happen the day before the shooting.
And so when you knew that they were lying, as Crane, the detective, was on the witness stand and proved, because the whole defense's argument or the whole defense's case was the fact that this was a huge surprise. Nobody knew this was coming. Nobody knew. And that's what they stuck with until they got back on the stand. And Crane had text messaging evidence that they knew prior to that day.
I was shocked to see that we actually heard from Becky again. I don't know if anybody was watching that video, but there was like 4 times, 3 or 4 times she tried to get off that stand as quick as she could.
No, that is not true at all.
That's all I think. Wait. Hold on a second. Let's get your subject here.
It was some of the oddest behavior I've ever seen in a courtroom. She was running from guilt, basically, the trying to jump off the hot seat.
A text message says, your dad asks you about John picking the kids up. Isn't that true?
Yes.
And the original document your dad is referring to is the order you received from the North Dakota judge on December 16th of 2020. Isn't that true?
No.
The order, are you familiar with the order from December 16th?
Yes.
And in that order, the judge orders that beginning the first weekend of February 2021, John Mast shall have parenting time every other weekend, beginning Friday at 6 p.m. Do you recall that is what that order said?
Yes.
I don't have any real questions.
You read it, Mr. Cook.
So yeah, being in court in person and watching somebody purge themselves on the stand, I've never seen anything like that before.
It seems like instead of trying to argue whether it was premeditated or not, it seems like people are still trying to excuse. If you really didn't plan this thing, wouldn't there be some remorse? If it was heat of the moment, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that, I wasn't thinking. I'm not seeing that right now. I was a little worried there at the end. The prosecution was very quiet. I thought they would have objected many times. I think a lot of people are a little worried. I mean, they were kicking ass, and it was just like out in the middle of nowhere, they went silent. The only thing I can think of, guys, is they must have something up their sleeve. Something just don't add up. We'll just have to wait and see what happens. So the prosecution made their closing arguments. I thought it was great.
On February 5th, 2021, the defendant, James Brashear, the fixer, fixed his situation and assassinated John Mast.
They had played a little bit of the confession early on, but they saved that full confession video for the closing arguments. And if you listen to what Jim said, thought about it 100 times. I shot him once, he didn't go down, he ran some more, and I thought, I hope I didn't do this just to wound him. Shot him 2 more times. He should have went down like a bad habit. He admitted to everything in that video.
So what happened? So what happened here while at Rosars?
He pulled up over there. I walked up and shot him. He was to meet my daughter here with the kids and take them off.
Okay.
I just called my daughter and told her don't come.
What was that?
I called my daughter and told her don't come here.
Okay.
I told her that I talked to him and he wasn't going to make it. So.
Okay.
So she didn't bring
How
him.
many rounds did you fire?
I don't know.
A couple or?
Oh yeah, more than one.
More than one?
And I don't know if the first one went right through him, but then the other ones, I don't know. They act like they were blanks. I think I shot him 4 times.
I'm with the suspect.
I knew I would go to jail.
Stand by one.
I knew.
Okay.
I know I'll have to pay for this.
Okay. And what did she have any idea this was going to happen, or?
No. Nobody did, but me.
Okay.
It's premeditated. I thought about it, weighed out the cost, and I couldn't let him take the kids for the weekend. I just couldn't do it.
Sure.
I don't know why the other three didn't do nothing. I think I shot him 4 times.
Okay.
He came to the right side of the door, and I shot him in the chest.
Okay.
That one hit. Then he took off running, and I shot either 2 or 3 more times at him, and they didn't seem to do anything.
Okay.
How many shots did he hit? Did he hit? Just one?
I can't comment on behalf of that.
He should have dropped like a bad habit, but he didn't. This ought to make the news, huh? Hope I didn't do all this and just wound him.
I mean, that was a good thing. I think the prosecution did a really good job at making sure that went there. The defense gets up. I want to say they said it was like 47, 50 minutes. I've never seen anybody make a closing argument that long. It was pretty, yeah. But he is still just making sure. He thought he was doing this. The kids were scared. He's trying to plant that seed of doubt. And you know, my fear is, most people, if this isn't going on with them, they don't understand it.
Day 3 after closing arguments, my initial thought was, this is a 1 to 2 hour thing for the jury. This is open and shut. Jim has admitted on the record that he planned it, he premeditated it, and he executed it.
We were waiting on a verdict. And yeah, it was around lunchtime. So I believe, hopefully sometime soon, they call us back. And guys, it's just a waiting game now. We'll have to wait and see what happens.
I think everybody overall, we felt like the case came in better than we had hoped it would, and it was, you know, the evidence was clear. And I think they seemed pretty happy with the way that it was presented, so I was glad that that was the case. And then we just had to wait, and waiting sometimes is the worst part.
So in my mind, I was thinking, if the jury doesn't come back by 3, 4 o'clock, then we have some dissenting arguments going on in the jurors.
We've been sitting here waiting all day. I thought we was gonna get a verdict today. It's kind of a little odd. This should have been an open and shut thing. They're waiting till tomorrow, I guess. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what else you would need to see outside that confession video, but they're saying we're gonna go into tomorrow, so it looks like there will be another day of trial.
I definitely didn't feel good about that. It was taking too long because this was, to me, pretty clear with the confession and the way it was and the way the evidence came in. If the jury's having a hard time with that, it's either there's one juror that they're not getting convinced, and so I started to think we might wind up with a deadlock jury. That was my first thought. And then as the next day kind of wore on, I started to have some concerns that there was going to be a different outcome that was not going to be great.
I don't know why it's taken so long, but it's a waiting game. We'll have to wait and see.
Mr. Presiding Juror, has the jury reached the verdict? Thank you. Would you please hand the verdict to my bailiff? Mr. Brashear, will you please stand and face the jury? And Madam Clerk, will you please read the verdict?
In the District Court of the 2nd Judicial District of the State of Idaho, in and for the County of Nez Perce, case number CR 35-21-815, State of Idaho versus James R. Brashear. We, the jury, for a verdict, unanimously answered the questions submitted to us as follows. Question 1. Is James R. Brashear not guilty or guilty of murder in the first degree? Not guilty. Question 2. Is James R. Brashear not guilty or guilty of second-degree murder? Not guilty. Question 3. Is James R. Brashear not guilty or guilty of voluntary manslaughter? Guilty.
And I was like, you gotta be kidding me. Seriously? I mean, I wanted to march right down to the courthouse and just let him have it. Like, I could not believe that outcome.
How did that just happen? How do you get a full confession and you go from first degree to manslaughter
It was definitely a shock. I've never been shocked by a verdict like this before. I just didn't, even though I had like some sense that something was off with this, I still was like, I really just couldn't believe it.
Not gonna lie to you guys. That verdict shocked me. I think it shocked all of us. I mean, he was convicted of voluntary manslaughter. At the same time, I'm not going to lie to you. Something doesn't feel right. Something doesn't seem right. I can't quite put my finger on it, but it didn't make sense to me.
Given the facts, going solely based on facts, I don't understand how it was voluntary manslaughter. When it's laid out, when you hear his own words admitting it was premeditated.
Separating hearsay from facts, I don't see how it could not be at least second-degree murder.
I thought it was open and shut from what I heard. I mean, I thought it was premeditated as heck. I thought, you know, the jury's going to come in there, hear the evidence. They're going to take about 2 hours and they're going to come back with a first-degree guilty verdict. I would have bet the farm on it.
The jury in this case is at fault. I mean, they didn't follow the law, which they were instructed to do.
There were several jurors that we wound up getting bounced for cause because they had made up their mind, and it wasn't all just one way or the other. It was kind of a mixed bag. And there were some who just clearly just knew too much about the case, and you want them to be learning about the case during the court proceedings, not from stuff they've read online or in the newspaper, which may or may not be very accurate.
The jury, I believe, was tainted. And the reason I know that is because I have a friend that was on the jury. I mean, it's a small town. So the chances of me coming in and seeing somebody on the jury that I know, very good chance. So I reached out to him, didn't get a response. So I have a friend of mine that's a good friend of mine that's a good friend of his. I mean, I know the juror's acquaintance, but I said, hey man, I need to get a hold of him. Oh yeah, he was on that trial case, so you guys were streaming. Yeah. Oh yeah, he really wanted to be on that jury because he was intrigued with the case. Do you tell me that a juror is allowed to be on the jury knowing about the case that he's intrigued about?
I would call it hometown cooking, basically. I come from a small town, just like Lewiston, and it looked like the jury was stacked and sympathetic to him.
The very first encounter I had with Jim, I wasn't quite sure what to think. It was a lot to process. And he went on to say that if John ever got the kids, he'd kill him. He said, I'll shoot him. From the time that Jim made that statement to me to the time that Jim shot him in the parking lot was about 2 years.
In that trial, to know that he just got voluntary manslaughter and there was a first and second degree, I honestly thought, you know, it might go to second degree at worst case scenario. There wasn't a person that was expecting what we saw.
They didn't try this as a murder trial. It was a family court thing. End of story. I mean, why bring up about what happened in family court when he was never charged?
This is why the silver bullet is so deadly. One tiny little doubt of evidence, they didn't even say it, just one little doubt. And this man got off with manslaughter.
I note that the PSI contains a note from the City of Williston Police Department detective, who is the primary detective on the cases where John Mast was alleged to have abused his children. The detective states, quote, John was beyond cooperative with all the criminal investigations and even went as far as consenting to do a polygraph, which he passed. My criminal cases with John were closed years ago. No charges filed.
I know that they were hoping for justice for John, and I don't believe that they feel that justice was served. And I don't believe that justice was served based off the facts.
He wasn't the only one involved, I feel. And with premeditated murder in my book.
That decision has reverberated all across the United States and even into other countries. I think if they DA got first degree, it would have just died down and moved on. But the fact that they gave manslaughter to someone who killed somebody point blank for no reason whatsoever, I think that's gonna light a serious fire.
John's just one dad that's been in this scenario. And unfortunately, you know, his fight for his children's over, but there are many others that are still continuing to fight and still struggling and afraid for what their outcome might be. Kids shouldn't be used as a pawn in cases. Kids deserve to have both parents in their life.
My first thought is that I miss John, and yet in the other sense, he is close to us. He had faith in God. He's in eternal rest and bliss. So as I major in that, it comforts me so much. And that's where I expect to meet John. In that beautiful land that we have just glimpses of. As we rushed up to his home after he died, the moment we got news, we hurried the 4.5 hours, almost 5 hours actually. And we soon, the next day, as all the family gathered, we found these journals. They were heartbreaking, but they're a treasure. Because as we read those, we felt the lonely heart he had.
Standing here today, it was just yesterday that we got the verdict, and I think it all kind of caught us by surprise. It's been a little hard to comprehend. It's very soon after. What's some of your thoughts on what we saw yesterday as we stand here?
My thoughts are simply this. We're thankful to live in a country that has law and order. We know we're deficient, and there's some systemic problems. But still, of course, we yield ourselves to the government of our land, and a jury made this decision. We are seeking to accept and be as comfortable with that as we can. I, as John's dad, did not look upon this process as we need to get revenge. Revenge is not ours. The Bible says that it's God's. We do recognize these instruments that we have here on earth to obtain that measure of justice. And we will rest in the jury's decision.
Father, true peace and comfort is knowing John is at rest, safe in the arms of Jesus, where there is no more pain, tears, loneliness, anguish. May you rest in sweet peace, John, for I know the plans I have for you, declared the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. Jeremiah 29:11.
I've been working on the John Mass case for about 4 years now, and every time we think we're near the end, something else comes up. You know, we're going to see this case all the way through until the end. Jim Brashear's trial just ended. I don't think we got the justice that we wanted, but he will more than likely be in prison for the rest of his life, so there was some justice served. Now, so on to the next chapter. We're not through. Here in the next month, we will be seeing the beginning of the wrongful death trial against Rebecca Brashear Mast. The Mast family took out a wrongful death lawsuit against her because they believe there's still more to this that we haven't went over, and if I'm going to be honest with you guys, I do as well. On my travels, I got to meet with somebody that was really amazing, and people need to hear what she has to say. Her name is Ashlyn Wiesa. She was a supervised visitation director, and she is the one that supervised all the visits with John and his kids. She was hired by Becky. She told us about the first time she met Jim and how he showed up, and in the records he said, "I will kill him. If he ever gets the kids, I will kill him." That was in the records. One of the main things that people have asked me about is, they were married for 8 years, John and Becky. How did it all of a sudden just go, tumultuous and everything? And every marriage has its problems, guys. I've known about this, but I've tried to stay out of it. At this point in time, I think people need to know about it. At one point in time, John was hitting a rocky point in his marriage. He was out of town. There was a woman there. He talked to her. He told her about everything that was going on, and he felt guilty that he was talking to somebody else about his marriage. He went, he admitted it to Becky, he admitted it to his family, and that's when it all went to hell in a handbasket. John thought he had worked it out. Okay, he had talked to her about it, and that's where the Basil restaurant incident comes in. He was there talking to her about it one night. At one point, Becky gets mad, she gets up to leave, John goes to put his hand on her shoulder, and she yanks it away, and then it becomes, "He hurt me." Okay, he had video that night, and when it went to trial, he took the video, and the courts didn't even look at it. At that point, John pled guilty so he could go ahead and see his kids. At that point in time, he wasn't getting to see them, wasn't getting to talk to them, or anything. He wanted it to be over with. Don't ever plead guilty for something that you didn't do, guys. That's not what you do. I understand why he did it, but don't do it. At that point in time, I think he was fed up, so he filed for divorce. 1 month after John filed for divorce is when he would get the first allegation that he had molested one of the kids. And then another month or so after that, he would get another allegation that he messed with one of the other kids. If you go back to this incident about this emotional affair, I really believe it's where this whole thing took off, and it ties the whole story together and why you saw what you did. Becky is the one that hired Ashlyn.
I was actually contacted originally by Becky Brashear and gave me the contact info, and actually gave John my contact info as well. She was going through a divorce with John, and that she would be needing services because of sexual allegations against John. John reached out to me. We got things scheduled. He came in for a first visit. From what I was told by Becky is that there was fear. They were very fearful of him. And when they came in, they were more shy, but not fearful. I was more surprised. I expected them to be a little more standoffish with what she had shared with me. As visits went on, each time Becky would tell me triggers, things that would trigger them due to incidences that she had alleged with.
And when she hired her, she told her all about the story, all about the allegations, and she told her there was certain triggers that she needed to be aware of with the kids and make sure that they did not happen.
John wasn't allowed to bring anything with Spider-Man or engage in play based on Spider-Man. And Ashira's triggers, she had said, were tea parties. They weren't allowed to have tea parties or talk about tea parties because those would be triggers for the kids. Throughout their visits, they did engage in play that would have included things that Becky considered triggers for them. I provide books and games and puzzles here for them to be able to utilize during their time together. And Zane asked, "Dad, can you get this one for me?" And it happened to be a puzzle that has Marvel heroes on it, and Spider-Man's one of them on it. Amongst the others, he chose those to play with, and that was all on him. But those were also things that I was told to be triggers.
What was on the front of that puzzle? Spider-Man.
At one point, we had a visit at one of our local parks here.
For the daughter, it was tea. Becky had told Ashlyn that anything to do with tea would make the daughter go crazy because that was what John would do with his daughter, and it set her off.
John had packed a lunch, knowing that we were going to go to the park. He packed a cooler, and he packed sandwiches, and he packed Pure Leaf iced tea. And when he was getting him out, asking, what the kids wanted to drink, Ashira grabbed that tea and she hugged it, and she hugged it tight and was like, "Oh, I love tea. I never get tea. Thank you, thank you." And she was like rolling around on the ground with it. And so again, that was another time that I observed, for behaviors to see what would trigger. And to me, she was excited to have tea, not afraid of tea. And, you know, Zane was excited to have tea too. They argued over who was gonna have which flavor, sort of thing.
There was 2 triggers that they were told that the kids would get very upset if they heard about it or saw it, and it didn't happen.
The incident with the dog, which was Gretchen, that was the visit that John's parents attended, and they actually brought the dog. Initially, when they got there, they just got out of the vehicle and they said hello and everything, you know, said hi to them, told them that they missed them.
This last one really upsets me more than anything. I am an animal lover. I love dogs. They're some of the most loyal things on the face of this earth. John had a dog. The kids loved the dog. Its name was Gretchen. And after John and Becky got divorced, she told the kids that the dog was dead. On that same picnic, John brought Gretchen. And when the dog came out of the car, the kids looked like they saw a ghost. They said, Mama told us that the dog was dead.
And John looked over at the car and goes, oh yeah. And he goes, hold on kids, Grandma and Grandpa have a surprise for you. And that's when he brought Gretchen out of the car for them. And they were so surprised because yeah, they stated, you know, Mom told us Gretchen died. Then they wanted to take Gretchen home with them. Becky was pretty upset by that Gretchen was there. It was John's choice, and he requested to have them. And he had given me weeks prior notice that they would be attending the visit. Becky didn't ever go into great detail of what the allegations were. She just said that there were open investigations into sexual assault allegations.
Was there anything about John's behavior or demeanor that made you think that he fit any of the things you were told?
No, there was nothing that he didn't ever act out in a way that would lead me to believe any of those allegations. We would have visits, and then there was a period of time where the kids no-showed visits. John would drive here from North Dakota and the kids would no-show. Wouldn't be able to reach Becky. In the 12 years that I've done this, I have never once had quite the volume of accusations from one parent or the other.
This is the type of case that we're messing with here. And even though Jim, we know, is the one that pulled the trigger, I feel like there's so much more to this story that we haven't told yet. And here we are. This story to be continued.